We live in an age of unprecedented scientific achievement. We have mapped the human genome, photographed black holes, sent machines to Mars, split the atom and harnessed its power. And yet, there exist phenomena, objects, events, technologies from humanity's distant past that our modern science cannot explain. Not because the evidence is lacking, not because the mysteries are poorly documented, but because when archaeologists, physicists, linguists, and historians examine the evidence with every tool available to 21st century scholarship, they encounter something that should not exist. An ancient Greek device containing gear technology that would not be reinvented for over 1,000 years. A 600-year-old manuscript written in a language that no computer, no cryptographer, no artificial intelligence can decipher. A mass psychogenic event where hundreds of people dance themselves to death, documented in medical records but unexplained by any known neurological or psychological condition. A temple complex built 11,000 years ago by people who, according to everything we understand about human civilization, should not have possessed the organization, motivation, or technical capability to construct such a thing. And a military weapon so devastating, so technologically sophisticated, that when the civilization that created it fell, the formula was lost completely and remains lost to this day. These are not fringe theories proposed by conspiracy theorists or ancient astronaut enthusiasts. These are mainstream archaeological and historical mysteries that peer-reviewed journals discuss, that major museums display, that credentialed scholars study and debate and ultimately admit, we do not know. And there is something deeply unsettling about that admission, because these mysteries force us to confront uncomfortable possibilities. That ancient civilizations possess knowledge we have lost. That human history is far stranger and more complex than our textbooks suggest. That the neat progression we imagine, from primitive to advanced, from ignorance to enlightenment, is not how knowledge actually works. That entire bodies of sophisticated understanding can vanish completely, leaving behind only artifacts that mock our certainty. The scientific method is built on the assumption that with enough evidence, enough analysis, enough time, any question can be answered. But what happens when the evidence leads not to answers, but to deeper questions? When the data suggests conclusions that contradict everything we think we know about history, technology, human capability, that is where we find ourselves with these 5 mysteries. They exist. The physical evidence is undeniable. Scholars have examined them for decades, in some cases centuries. Scientific analysis has been applied using every available technique. And still, the fundamental questions remain. How? Why? Who? This is the complete documented history of 5 phenomena that should not exist according to our understanding of human civilization. 5 mysteries where modern science, with all its tools, all its theories, all its computational power, encounters the limits of what we can know. We will examine the physical evidence, review the scholarly debate, present the competing theories, and ultimately acknowledge what the experts themselves acknowledge. After decades of research, we still do not fully understand what we are looking at. These are the ancient mysteries that modern science still cannot explain, and they have been haunting us for a very long time. Chapter 1. The Antikythera mechanism, the ancient computer that shouldn't exist. In the spring of 1901, Greek sponge divers were working near the island of Antikythera, a small rocky outcrop between Crete and mainland Greece, when they discovered something extraordinary at a depth of 45 meters. A Roman shipwreck dated to approximately 85 to 60 BC, filled with statues, pottery, glassware, and jewelry. Among the artifacts was a corroded lump of bronze and wood, barely recognizable as anything man-made. It was catalogued, stored, and largely ignored for decades. The statues were more impressive, the jewelry more valuable. This corroded chunk of metal seemed like debris. But in 1902, an archaeologist named Valerios Stais was examining the artifacts when the lump of bronze split apart, revealing something impossible. Gears, dozens of bronze gears, some as small as coins, fitted together with extraordinary precision. Inscriptions in ancient Greek, dials, pointers, a sophistication of mechanical engineering that should not exist in an artifact from the 1st century BC. Because, according to everything historians understood about ancient technology, gear mechanisms of this complexity would not be developed until medieval Europe, over 1,000 years later. For most of the 20th century, the Antikythera mechanism remained an anomaly. Scholars knew it was sophisticated, but could not determine its purpose. The bronze was too corroded, the fragments too incomplete. Theories ranged from astrolabe to navigational device to elaborate toy. Then, in 2005, a team of researchers used advanced X-ray computed tomography to image the mechanism's interior without damaging it further. What they discovered was staggering. The Antikythera mechanism is an astronomical calculator of extraordinary complexity. It contains at least 30 bronze gears, possibly as many as 70 before corrosion destroyed some components. These gears are arranged in a differential system that would not be reinvented in Europe until the 16th century AD. Its purpose: to predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets, to calculate eclipses years in advance, to track the Olympic Games cycle, to model the irregular motion of the moon using an epicyclic theory that we credit to the astronomer Hipparchus, but that apparently was built into mechanical computers decades or centuries before his lifetime. The device could predict solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable accuracy. It incorporated the Metonic cycle, a 19-year pattern relating solar years to lunar months, and the Callipic cycle, a refinement spanning 76 years. It showed the position of the moon's orbit, accounting for its elliptical path and varying speed. It displayed which constellations were visible at any given time. This was not simple astronomy. This was computational astronomy, mechanical modeling of celestial motions built into a portable bronze device roughly the size of a shoebox. Here is what makes the Antikythera mechanism genuinely mysterious rather than simply impressive. First, the sophistication. The gear teeth are precisely cut using techniques that historians believed were not developed until the Renaissance. The mechanism incorporates differential gearing, a system where two or more inputs combine to produce a single output, that we associate with modern automobile transmissions. The miniaturization is extraordinary. The entire device, when complete, probably weighed only a few kilograms. Second, it is unique. No other artifact like this has ever been found. Not a prototype, not a successor model, not even a detailed description in ancient texts that would indicate similar devices existed. The Roman engineer Vitruvius, writing around the same time the mechanism was built, describes water clocks and catapults, and architectural devices. He mentions nothing remotely approaching this level of mechanical complexity. The astronomer Cicero, also writing in the 1st century BC, makes a single cryptic reference to Archimedes constructing a device that modeled the heavens. But Archimedes died in 212 BC, over a century before the Antikythera ship sank. And Cicero's description is vague enough that scholars cannot determine if he was referring to an armillary sphere, a planetarium, or something else entirely. Third, we do not know who built it. Greek inscriptions on the mechanism mention astronomical data associated with colonies in northwestern Greece and possibly Corinth. This suggests it may have been constructed in that region. But there is no maker's mark, no signature, no clear indication of whether this was created by a single genius inventor or represented the work of a sustained technological tradition. And that is what haunts researchers. If the Antikythera mechanism represents a technological tradition, if this level of gear-based computation was something multiple craftsmen understood and built, where are the other examples? Where are the workshops? Where are the failed prototypes, the teaching models, the simplified versions for students learning the craft? If it represents the work of a singular genius, one Archimedes-level intellect who designed and built this device, why does it appear fully formed, without evidence of earlier, cruder attempts? How did they learn to cut gear teeth with such precision, without practicing on simpler machines first? And most troubling, why did this technology vanish? By the 4th century AD, just a few hundred years after the Antikythera mechanism was lost at sea, gear technology in Europe had regressed dramatically. Watermills used simple wooden gears. Clocks were water-based or relied on falling weights, not mechanical computation. The knowledge required to build something like the Antikythera mechanism was gone. It would not return until the medieval Islamic Golden Age, when scholars like Al-Jazari built elaborate automata and astronomical clocks. And even those devices, sophisticated as they were, did not quite match the Antikythera mechanism's level of miniaturization and computational integration. In Europe, differential gearing would not appear until the 16th century. Gear-based astronomical computers would not be built until the 18th century. The Antikythera level of sophistication would not be achieved again until the development of mechanical watches and precision chronometers in the 1700s and 1800s. Over 2,000 years later, modern researchers have built working reconstructions based on X-ray analysis of the fragments. These reconstructions function. They predict eclipses accurately. They model planetary motion. But the researchers building them are using modern tools: precision lathes, computer-aided design, metallurgical analysis to determine optimal bronze alloys. The ancient builders had none of this. They worked with hand tools, manual lathes, empirical knowledge of metalworking. And yet they created something that required understanding not just of astronomy, which we know the Greeks possessed, but of mechanical engineering, gear ratios, material tolerances, and computational modeling. Who were they? How did they acquire this knowledge? Why do we have no other examples of their work? We do not know. And that is the mystery. Not that the Antikythera mechanism exists. It does, sitting in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, available for anyone to examine. Not that it was sophisticated. X-ray analysis has documented every gear, every inscription, every calculated motion. The mystery is context. An artifact this advanced suggests a technological tradition, a body of knowledge, a community of skilled craftsmen. But we have found no evidence of that tradition. No workshops, no teaching texts, no other devices. Just this one corroded bronze mechanism, salvaged from a shipwreck 2,000 years after it was built, representing a level of technology that should not exist and apparently did not persist. Modern science can tell us what the Antikythera mechanism does, how it works, what astronomical knowledge it encodes. But it cannot tell us how a civilization built it, why the technology vanished, or what else they might have created that we have not yet discovered. The gears turn, the calculations are precise, and the questions remain unanswered. Chapter 2. The Voynich Manuscript, the book that no one can read. In 1912, an antique book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich purchased a mysterious manuscript from Villa Mondragone, a Jesuit college near Rome. The manuscript was approximately 6 inches by 9 inches, bound in worn vellum, containing 240 pages of handwritten text and illustrations. But the text was in no known language. and the illustrations depicted plants that did not exist. Voynich recognized immediately that he had acquired something extraordinary. He spent the rest of his life trying to decipher it. He died in 1930 without succeeding. Nearly a century later, with computational linguistics, artificial intelligence, and every cryptographic technique modern science can deploy, we have still not deciphered the Voynich manuscript. It remains the most mysterious book in the world. The Voynich manuscript is divided into 6 distinct sections, identifiable by their illustrations, though not by any readable text. The herbal section shows plants, but these are not normal botanical illustrations. The plants have leaves, roots, and flowers that do not correspond to any known species. Some resemble herbs found in medieval pharmacopoeias. Others are completely alien. Tubers connected to bladder-like structures, leaves sprouting from impossible angles, root systems that defy biological logic. The astronomical section contains circular diagrams with labels that might be months or zodiac signs, surrounded by stars and what appear to be descriptions of celestial phenomena. But the star patterns do not match any known constellation. The biological section, which some scholars call the most disturbing part of the manuscript, shows naked human figures, mostly women, bathing in or emerging from networks of tubes and chambers filled with dark liquid. What this represents is anyone's guess. Alchemical diagrams, medical illustrations, religious symbolism. No one knows. The pharmaceutical section displays drawings of plant parts, roots, leaves, stems, alongside small objects that might be medicinal containers or alchemical vessels. The accompanying text is presumably instructions or descriptions, but we cannot read them. The cosmological section contains more circular diagrams, this time with 9 interconnected islands or rosettes, each containing clusters of stars or celestial objects surrounded by dense handwritten text. And finally, the recipes section, pages and pages of text arranged in short paragraphs, each marked with a symbol that might indicate an ingredient or a step in a process. This looks like a cookbook or a manual of procedures, but for what purpose, we cannot determine. The Voynich manuscript has defeated every attempt at decryption. During World War II, codebreakers from the United States and United Kingdom, the same specialists who were breaking German Enigma codes and Japanese military ciphers, examined the Voynich manuscript. They failed. In the 1970s, the National Security Agency analyzed the manuscript using the most advanced computational linguistics available at the time. They concluded the text was either an extremely sophisticated cipher or a previously unknown natural language. They could not crack it. In the 2000s, researchers applied modern artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms designed to identify language patterns and decrypt unknown codes. The AI identified patterns, it recognized structure, but it could not translate a single word with confidence. Professional cryptographers, amateur codebreakers, linguists, computer scientists, mathematicians, hundreds of researchers over more than a century have attempted to decipher the Voynich manuscript. Some have claimed success. None of their solutions have been accepted by the scholarly community because none of them produce coherent, sensible translations that align with the manuscript's evident topics and structure. The problem is this: if the manuscript is an elaborate cipher, it is extraordinarily sophisticated for the 15th century. No other encrypted text from that era remotely approaches this level of complexity. Medieval ciphers were relatively simple substitution codes that modern analysis cracks in minutes. If the manuscript is written in an unknown natural language, perhaps a language of a civilization that was destroyed, or a constructed language created by the author, then how did the author learn to write so fluently and consistently in it? The manuscript contains roughly 35,000 words. That is not a simple invented code. That is linguistic productivity requiring either a native speaker of a real language or an extraordinary constructed system. And if the manuscript is a hoax, elaborate nonsense designed to look like meaningful text, then why does statistical analysis reveal linguistic patterns consistent with real languages? Creating fake text that passes computational linguistic analysis requires understanding of language structure far beyond what was available in the 15th century. Modern linguists struggle to create artificial text that fools statistical analysis. A medieval hoaxer could not have done it. So what is it? One of the most disturbing aspects of the Voynich manuscript is the botanical illustrations. Medieval herbals, books documenting medicinal plants, are common. We have hundreds of them. They show plants that exist: mint, rosemary, mandrake, hemlock. The illustrations range from crude to detailed, but the plants themselves are recognizable. The Voynich manuscript's botanical section shows plants that do not exist. Botanists have examined the illustrations carefully. Some plants resemble known species just enough to tantalize. What looks almost like a sunflower, what might be a lily, something vaguely resembling ginger root. But the details are wrong. Leaves attached at impossible angles, root systems that defy biological logic, flowers with petal counts that do not occur in nature. A few plants have been tentatively identified. One illustration might show viola tricolor. Another possibly depicts Taraxacum officinale. But these identifications are speculative and represent a tiny fraction of the manuscript's botanical content. The vast majority of plants are unidentifiable. What does this mean? One possibility: the illustrator was not skilled at botanical drawing and simply drew plants incorrectly, creating distorted versions of real species. But this does not explain the consistency of the distortions or why some plants are recognizable while others are completely alien. Another possibility: the plants are symbolic or allegorical, not meant to depict real species, but to represent alchemical concepts or spiritual ideas. Medieval alchemy often used botanical imagery metaphorically. But if so, why are there so many of them? And why does the text appear to be descriptive rather than philosophical? A third, more unsettling possibility: the plants are from a pharmacological tradition we have lost. Medieval Europe had access to plants from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East through trade routes. Some of these plants might not have survived to the present, especially if they were rare or grew in regions later affected by climate change, deforestation, or political upheaval. If this is true, the Voynich manuscript might be documenting a lost materia medica, a genuine medical tradition with real plants, real treatments, written in a language we can no longer read because the community that spoke it vanished. We do not know. The manuscript's ownership history is fragmentary but intriguing. It apparently belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who ruled from 1576 to 1612. Rudolph was obsessed with alchemy, astrology, and esoteric knowledge. He supposedly purchased the manuscript for 600 gold ducats, a fortune, because he believed it was the work of the English philosopher Roger Bacon, who died in 1292. Whether Bacon actually wrote it is disputed. The carbon dating places the vellum in the early 1400s, after Bacon's death. But it is possible the text was copied onto new vellum from an earlier source. After Rudolph's death, the manuscript passed through various hands before ending up in Villa Mondragoni's library, where Voynich purchased it in 1912. Since 1969, it has been housed at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book Library, where researchers can examine it freely. It has been examined, exhaustively, by the best minds in cryptography, linguistics, botany, and medieval studies, and it remains unread. The Voynich manuscript is a genuine medieval document, written in a system of communication that follows linguistic patterns, describing topics that include botany, astronomy, biology, and possibly medicine or alchemy. But no one alive can read it. Modern science has determined what it is made of, when it was created, what statistical properties its language exhibits, what subjects its illustrations depict. But modern science cannot tell us what it says. The book exists, the evidence is accessible, the mystery endures. Chapter 3. The Dancing Plague of 1518. When hundreds danced themselves to death. In July of 1518, a woman named Frau Trophea stepped into the narrow streets of Strasbourg, a prosperous city in the Holy Roman Empire, now part of modern France, and began to dance. Not at a celebration, not at a festival. There was no music, no occasion. She simply started dancing, alone, in the street, moving continuously without rest. Within a week, 34 others had joined her. Within a month, approximately 400 people were dancing uncontrollably in the streets of Strasbourg, unable to stop, dancing day and night until they collapsed from exhaustion, heart attacks, or strokes. Dozens died. The authorities were helpless. Physicians could not explain it. And modern medicine, 500 years later, still cannot fully account for what happened. This is the dancing plague of 1518. And it remains one of the most disturbing and poorly understood medical events in European history. The event is exceptionally well documented. This was not folklore or legend embellished over centuries. Multiple contemporary sources describe the plague in detail. The Strasbourg City Chronicle records that the dancing began in mid-July. Physician notes from the time describe patients dancing ardently without rest, their feet bleeding, their bodies collapsing from exhaustion, only to rise and continue dancing as soon as they regained consciousness. Sermonic notes from local churches mention the plague and the authorities' attempts to end it through religious intervention. Advice from the city council, preserved in municipal records, shows officials consulting physicians and attempting various treatments. This was a real event, documented as it happened by multiple independent sources who had no reason to fabricate or exaggerate. And what they documented was horrifying. The dancers could not stop. Eyewitness accounts describe people dancing for days without pause, only stopping when they physically could not continue. Some danced until their feet bled through their shoes. Others danced until they suffered heart attacks or strokes. The exact death toll is unknown, but contemporary sources suggest dozens of fatalities, possibly as many as 15 people per day at the plague's peak. The dancers were not joyful. They were terrified. They screamed. They begged for help. They cried out that they could not control their bodies. But the dancing continued. The city authorities, desperate to end the outbreak, consulted with physicians. The prevailing medical theory of the time was based on Galenic humoral medicine, the idea that illness resulted from imbalances in bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. The physicians diagnosed the dancers with hot blood, an overheating of the blood that compelled frenzied movement. The prescribed treatment, more dancing. The reasoning was that the afflicted needed to dance out the heat in their blood, expelling the excess through vigorous movement until balance was restored. So the city council, following medical advice, did something extraordinary. They encouraged the dancing. They built wooden stages in public squares. They hired musicians to play continuously. They paid professional dancers to accompany the afflicted, hoping that structured, managed dancing would be therapeutic. It made the plague worse. More people joined the dancing. The stages became sites of mass collapse. The musicians played for days without stopping, watching the dancers scream and fall and rise and dance again. Eventually, the authorities realized their mistake and stopped the music, dismantled the stages, and banned dancing entirely. By early September, the plague had ended as mysteriously as it began. The survivors stopped dancing. Life in Strasbourg returned to normal. No explanation was ever established. And the question that has haunted medical historians for 5 centuries is simple: why? Modern medicine has proposed several theories to explain the dancing plague of 1518. None of them fully account for the documented evidence. Theory 1. Ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus, Claviceps purpurea, that grows on rye and other grains, particularly in damp conditions. When consumed, ergot produces ergotamine, a compound that causes hallucinations, muscle spasms, and convulsions. Medieval Europe experienced numerous ergot poisoning outbreaks, often called St. Anthony's fire, because the afflicted suffered burning sensations in their extremities. Ergot poisoning can cause involuntary muscle contractions and altered mental states. Some researchers have suggested that the dancers consumed ergot-contaminated bread, leading to mass hallucinations and uncontrolled movement. But there are problems with this theory. First, ergot poisoning causes convulsions and spasms, not coordinated dancing. The historical records describe people dancing, moving rhythmically, continuously, in patterns consistent with actual dancing, not random thrashing or seizures. Second, ergot poisoning causes vasoconstriction, reducing blood flow to the extremities. This leads to gangrene, blackened fingers and toes, and intense pain that makes movement difficult. Dancing for days with ergot poisoning would be physiologically agonizing, likely impossible. Third, the dancing plague was localized to Strasbourg and a few surrounding towns. If ergot-contaminated grain was the cause, the outbreak should have been more geographically widespread, affecting entire regions that consumed bread from the same harvest. Ergot poisoning is well documented in medieval Europe. The symptoms are known. They do not match what happened in Strasbourg in 1518. Theory 2. Mass psychogenic illness, also called mass hysteria or mass sociogenic illness. This is a psychological phenomenon where groups of people develop similar physical symptoms, tremors, fainting, nausea, pain, despite having no underlying organic disease. The symptoms are real, not fabricated, but they originate from psychological stress rather than infection or toxin. Mass psychogenic illness typically occurs in environments of high stress, where social bonds are strong and suggestibility is high. Adolescent girls in schools, factory workers in close quarters, religious communities, tight-knit groups experiencing collective anxiety. Strasbourg in 1518 was indeed under extreme stress. The region had recently experienced famine, disease, and political instability. A syphilis epidemic had ravaged the population. Crop failures had caused food shortages. There was widespread belief in divine punishment and apocalyptic prophecy. Under such conditions, mass psychogenic illness is possible. One person begins exhibiting symptoms, perhaps dancing as a religious expression or psychological breakdown. Others, already anxious and suggestible, unconsciously mimic the behavior. The dancing spreads through social contagion, not biological infection. This theory better explains the dancing itself. Coordinated, rhythmic movement rather than random convulsions. It explains the localization. Mass psychogenic illness spreads through direct observation and social networks, not through contaminated food. It explains why stopping the music and banning dancing helped end the outbreak, removing the social cues and breaking the feedback loop. But it struggles to explain the duration and intensity. Mass psychogenic illness typically resolves quickly, within hours or days, once the triggering stress is addressed or the social situation changes. The dancing plague lasted over a month. People danced for days without stopping. They danced until they died. Modern cases of mass psychogenic illness do not show this level of severity or persistence. Schoolgirls who develop tremors recover within days. Factory workers who faint return to normal once removed from the stressful environment. No modern documented case of mass psychogenic illness has resulted in people continuing a behavior until death, despite obvious physical harm. So while mass psychogenic illness is the most widely accepted theory among medical historians, it cannot fully explain the Strasbourg event. Theory 3. Religious ecstasy or curse. Medieval Europe attributed many inexplicable events to divine or demonic intervention. The dancers themselves, according to some sources, believed they were cursed by Saint Vitus, a Christian martyr associated with neurological disorders. Dancing was thought to be both a symptom of his curse and a potential cure if performed as pilgrimage or penance. Some historians suggest the dancing plague was a form of religious ecstasy, trance dancing, similar to practices in other cultures where prolonged rhythmic movement induces altered states of consciousness. In this interpretation, the dancers were not ill, but participating in a religious ritual that got out of control. This theory aligns with medieval religious culture and explains the dancers' belief that they were compelled by supernatural forces. But it does not explain why the dancing was involuntary, terrifying, and deadly. Religious ecstasy, even in extreme forms, typically involves willing participants who stop when exhausted. The Strasbourg dancers could not stop. They begged for help. They died. This was not willing religious practice. It was something that happened to people against their will. Theory 4. Unknown neurological condition. Some researchers have proposed that the dancing plague was caused by an unknown neurological or infectious disease, something that triggered uncontrolled motor activity, similar to conditions like Sydenham's chorea, a complication of streptococcal infection that causes involuntary movements, or encephalitis lethargica, a mysterious 1920s epidemic that caused sleep disturbances and movement disorders. This theory has the advantage of treating the dancing as a genuine physiological symptom rather than psychological or toxicological. It explains why people could not stop, why the movement was continuous, why exhaustion did not end it. But it struggles with the same problem as ergot poisoning. No known neurological condition produces symptoms that precisely match the dancing plague. Chorea causes jerky, irregular movements, not sustained rhythmic dancing. Encephalitis lethargica caused lethargy and Parkinsonian symptoms, not hyperactivity. No modern movement disorder results in people dancing continuously for days until death. And if it was an infectious neurological disease, why did it disappear? Neurological epidemics leave traces. Encephalitis lethargica affected hundreds of thousands worldwide before fading in the 1930s, but cases still occasionally appear. If the dancing plague was caused by an infectious agent, We should see occasional recurrences. We do not. The dancing plague of 1518 is exhaustively documented. We know when it started. We know how many people were affected. We know what authorities did to try to stop it. We know how it ended. But we do not know why it happened. Ergot poisoning does not fit the symptoms. Mass psychogenic illness does not explain the severity or duration. Religious ecstasy does not account for the involuntary nature and fatalities. No known neurological condition matches the documented behavior. Modern neuroscience can describe the brain mechanisms involved in movement, compulsion, and motor control. We understand how dopamine dysregulation causes movement disorders. We know how stress affects behavior. We have imaged brains during trance states and mapped the neural correlates of dance. But we cannot explain how 400 people in a single city began dancing uncontrollably and could not stop, dancing through bleeding feet, dancing through exhaustion, dancing until heart failure, for over a month in an outbreak that appeared suddenly and vanished just as suddenly, leaving no clear cause and no recurrence in 500 years. The dancing plague happened. The evidence is overwhelming. The explanation remains unknown. Chapter 4. Göbekli Tepe, the temple that rewrites human history. In 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt began excavating a site in southeastern Turkey, near the city of Şanlıurfa, that had been noted but largely ignored for decades. The site was called Göbekli Tepe, Turkish for Potbelly Hill, and local farmers had been finding worked stones there for generations. What Schmidt uncovered over the next 20 years of excavation rewrote our understanding of human civilization. Göbekli Tepe is a temple complex consisting of massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, arranged in circles and decorated with intricate carvings of animals: lions, foxes, scorpions, vultures, snakes. The pillars stand up to 5.5 meters tall. The site covers approximately 22 acres. It is the oldest known monumental architecture built by humans, and it was constructed approximately 11,500 years ago. 11,500 years ago, according to everything archaeologists understood about human development, people were hunter-gatherers living in small mobile groups. Agriculture had not been invented. Permanent settlements did not exist. Complex social organization was millennia away. The construction of monumental religious architecture was supposed to come after farming, after villages, after the development of specialized labor and social hierarchies that could support non-food producing specialists like priests and stone carvers. Göbekli Tepe precedes all of that. It was built by people who should not have had the organization, the motivation, or the technical capability to build such a thing. And yet they did. And then they buried it deliberately, for reasons we do not understand, preserving it perfectly for 11,000 years until modern archaeologists dug it up and confronted a mystery that challenges the entire timeline of human civilization. The scale of Göbekli Tepe is staggering. Each T-shaped pillar was quarried from limestone bedrock, approximately a quarter-mile away. The stone was cut, shaped, transported, and erected without metal tools, without wheels, without domesticated animals to pull sledges. The builders used stone tools, flint, obsidian, harder stone to work softer stone, and human labor. The pillars are not crude. They are precisely shaped, with smooth surfaces and sharp edges. Many are decorated with high-relief carvings of animals, not simple scratches, but sophisticated three-dimensional sculpture showing anatomical detail and dynamic poses. Foxes crouch, snakes coil, scorpions rear. Vultures spread wings. Some pillars have human arms carved on their sides, suggesting they represent stylized human figures. But they have no faces, no legs, just the arms and the T-shape, standing in circles like silent watchers performing some ritual we cannot decipher. The site contains at least 20 circular structures, though only a fraction have been excavated. Each circle consists of 2 large central pillars, surrounded by smaller pillars set into stone walls. The circles vary in size, the largest being approximately 20 meters in diameter. The labor required to build this is immense. Estimates suggest that quarrying, transporting, carving, and erecting a single large pillar would require 500 people working continuously for several months. Multiply that by dozens of pillars. Add the construction of the circular walls, the carving of decorations, the preparation of the site. This was not the work of a small family group or a single community. This required coordination of hundreds, possibly thousands of people, sustained over years or decades, to build something that had no practical survival function. Because Göbekli Tepe is not a settlement. No evidence of permanent habitation has been found. No houses, no hearths for cooking, no storage facilities for grain. People came to Göbekli Tepe, built these structures, performed rituals we can only guess at, and then left. It is purely ceremonial, a temple. Possibly the first temple built by humans, built before agriculture, before permanent villages, before everything we thought had to come first. To understand how shocking Göbekli Tepe is, consider the timeline. Göbekli Tepe, approximately 9500 BC. Stonehenge, approximately 3000 BC, over 6,000 years later. The Great Pyramid of Giza, approximately 2500 BC, 7,000 years later. The earliest cities in Mesopotamia, Uruk, Ur, approximately 4000 BC, over 5,000 years later. The invention of writing in Sumer, approximately 3200 BC, 6,000 years later. Göbekli Tepe is older than civilization. It is older than agriculture. It is older than pottery, than weaving, than permanent architecture of any kind anywhere else in the world. When Göbekli Tepe was built, there were no cities, no kings, no priests, no written language, no metal tools, no domesticated animals, except possibly dogs. Humans lived in small groups, following game, gathering wild plants, moving seasonally. And somehow, these mobile hunter-gatherers organized labor on a scale that would not be seen again for thousands of years, to build a monument whose purpose we still do not fully understand. The iconography of Göbekli Tepe is dominated by dangerous animals. Vultures feature prominently, birds associated with death and carrion, lions and leopards, apex predators, scorpions and snakes, venomous, dangerous, foxes, cunning and wild, boars, aggressive and unpredictable. Notably absent, domesticated animals, no sheep, no cattle, no goats. This makes sense because these animals had not yet been domesticated when Göbekli Tepe was built, but it underscores the point. This is a hunter-gatherer cosmology, a worldview where humans coexist with wild nature, where predators are powerful symbols, where death is ever present. Some researchers interpret the animal carvings as representing constellations, an early star map carved in stone. The arrangement of animals might correspond to positions of stars or constellations visible in the night sky 11,000 years ago. If true, Göbekli Tepe would also be the world's oldest astronomical observatory. Other researchers see shamanic symbolism, animals representing spiritual guardians or totems. The vultures might symbolize death and rebirth, common themes in shamanic practice, where death of the ego leads to spiritual transformation. Still others propose that Göbekli Tepe was a mortuary site, a place where the dead were exposed to vultures, a practice called excarnation or sky burial. Their bones later buried or deposited elsewhere. Some human bones have been found at the site, though not in quantities suggesting it was primarily a burial ground. We do not know. The builders left no writing. No myths survived to explain the symbolism. We have only the stones and the carvings, silent witnesses to rituals performed 11,000 years ago. And then, after centuries or possibly millennia of use, the builders did something extraordinary. They buried Göbekli Tepe, not accidentally, not through neglect or abandonment, deliberately. They filled the circles with thousands of tons of rubble and soil, carefully covering the pillars, preserving them perfectly, and then walked away. Why? Archaeologists know the burial was intentional because the fill dirt contained stone tools, animal bones, and debris consistent with deliberate deposition, not natural accumulation. The pillars show no signs of weathering that would occur if they had stood exposed for centuries before being covered by wind-blown soil. They were standing one day, and shortly thereafter, they were buried. Several theories attempt to explain this. Theory 1. Ritual termination. Perhaps burying the temple was itself a ritual, a sacred act closing one era and opening another. Many cultures ritually kill sacred objects or buildings when their purpose is fulfilled, treating them as living entities that can die or be retired with honor. Theory 2. Theological shift. Perhaps the religion or worldview that required Göbekli Tepe changed. As humans transitioned from hunting and gathering to agriculture, their relationship with nature shifted. Wild predators became less central. Domesticated animals, seasonal planting cycles, and rain became the new focus. The old temple, dedicated to the wild, was no longer relevant. Theory 3. Environmental change. Climate data shows that the region became more arid around the time Göbekli Tepe was buried. Perhaps the community could no longer support the labor required to maintain the site and made the decision to preserve it through burial rather than let it decay. Theory 4. Unknown cultural reason. We may simply lack the cultural context to understand why burying the site made sense to the builders. Their motivations might be completely alien to our way of thinking. What we know is that the burial preserved Göbekli Tepe perfectly. When Klaus Schmidt began excavating in the 1990s, the pillars were exactly as they had been left 11,000 years earlier, upright, intact, protected by the very earth that had hidden them from us for so long. Göbekli Tepe has fundamentally altered how archaeologists understand the development of human civilization. The old model went like this: agriculture to surplus food, to permanent settlements, to social stratification, to specialized labor, to monumental architecture, to religion and temples. Göbekli Tepe reverses that sequence. Monumental religious architecture came first. The temple preceded the village. Ritual preceded farming. Some archaeologists now propose that religion, the need to gather for ceremonies, to build sacred spaces, to participate in shared rituals, was the driving force behind the Neolithic revolution. That humans did not settle down to farm and then invent religion. They gathered for religious reasons, and that gathering created the conditions that made agriculture necessary and possible. Supporting this theory, wild wheat and barley grow naturally in the hills around Göbekli Tepe. Genetic analysis suggests that wheat was first domesticated in this exact region, within a few kilometers of the temple site. Perhaps the gatherings at Göbekli Tepe, hundreds or thousands of people coming together for ceremonies, created pressure to produce more food to feed the crowds. Perhaps the need to support the temple drove the invention of farming. If true, this inverts our entire understanding of civilization. We did not build temples because we had cities and agriculture and surplus. We built cities and developed agriculture because we needed to support our temples. Göbekli Tepe suggests that the human impulse toward the sacred, toward ritual, toward creating meaning through monumental architecture is older and more fundamental than we imagined. That before we were farmers or city dwellers, we were builders of temples. That the first thing humans did when we gained the capacity for large-scale cooperation was not to build houses or granaries or walls. We built monuments to gods we can no longer name. Less than 5% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetic surveys reveal that at least 16 additional circular structures remain buried. The site extends far beyond what has been uncovered. There may be dozens more circles, hundreds more pillars, carvings and structures we have not yet seen. Klaus Schmidt, who dedicated his life to excavating Göbekli Tepe, estimated that full excavation would take another 50 years minimum, possibly longer. He died in 2014, his work unfinished. Modern archaeology proceeds slowly, carefully, documenting everything, preserving context. Rushing would destroy irreplaceable information. So the excavation continues at a measured pace, uncovering a few square meters per year, while the vast majority of the temple remains underground, waiting. What will we find in the unexcavated circles? More animal carvings, human burials, clues to the rituals performed there, evidence of even older structures beneath the ones we found. We do not know. Göbekli Tepe exists. The timeline is verified through multiple dating methods. The sophistication is undeniable. The implications challenge our fundamental assumptions about human history, but the ultimate questions remain unanswered. Who built it? Why? What rituals were performed among those silent stone watchers? What beliefs motivated people to quarry and carve and erect pillars weighing 10 tons, using only stone tools and human labor? And why, after centuries or millennia, did they bury their creation and walk away? Modern archaeology has given us the when and the how. The why remains buried with 95% of the site, waiting for future generations to uncover, if they can. Chapter 5. Greek Fire. The weapon, so devastating its secret, was lost forever. In the 7th century AD, the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of the Roman Empire centered in Constantinople, faced an existential threat. The armies of the Rashidun Caliphate, energized by the new religion of Islam, had conquered Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and Persia in a series of stunning military victories. By 674, Arab fleets were besieging Constantinople itself, attempting to destroy the last major Christian power in the eastern Mediterranean. The Byzantine navy was outnumbered. The city's walls, though formidable on land, could not protect against naval assault. Constantinople appeared doomed. And then the Byzantines deployed a weapon so terrifying, so effective, that it shattered the Arab siege and preserved the empire for another 700 years. Greek fire, a liquid incendiary weapon that burned on water, could not be extinguished by conventional means and turned naval warfare into absolute horror. Ships caught in Greek fire did not sink. They burned completely, while sailors leapt into the sea only to find the water itself aflame. The formula for Greek fire was one of the Byzantine Empire's most closely guarded state secrets. Only a handful of people knew how to make it. The secret was passed from emperor to emperor, guarded by the imperial family, never written down in full. And when the Byzantine Empire finally fell in 1453, the secret of Greek fire died with it. We know it existed. We have detailed descriptions of its use. We have accounts from both Byzantine and enemy sources describing its devastating effects, but we do not know how to make it. Modern science has attempted to recreate Greek fire for over 500 years. We have failed. The primary sources describing Greek fire are remarkably consistent. Byzantine chroniclers describe a liquid mixture that could be heated and pressurized, then projected from bronze tubes mounted on the prows of warships. When ignited, it produced a stream of flame that could reach enemy vessels at considerable distance. Some sources suggest up to 30 meters or more. The flame had several distinctive properties. It burned on water. Unlike ordinary fire, which water extinguishes, Greek fire continued burning even when the sea itself was ablaze. Sailors who abandoned burning ships by jumping into the water found no safety there. It could not be extinguished by water. Pouring water on Greek fire made it burn more intensely. Some sources suggest that water actually spread the flames rather than suppressing them. It burned with extreme heat and thick, choking smoke. Descriptions mention the psychological terror as much as the physical damage, the smell, the smoke, the screaming, the inescapable nature of the weapon. It adhered to surfaces. Greek fire stuck to wood, cloth, and flesh, continuing to burn like napalm. Victims could not wipe it off or shake it loose. It could be stored and transported safely when not ignited. This suggests the formula was stable at room temperature, requiring heat or a specific ignition method to become active. Greek fire's impact on Byzantine military history cannot be overstated. The weapon first appears in historical records during the reign of Emperor Constantine IV, 668 to 685. A Christian refugee from Syria named Kallinikos, described as an architect or engineer, brought the formula to Constantinople. Whether he invented it or acquired it from earlier sources is unknown. In 674, during the first Arab siege of Constantinople, Greek fire was deployed for the first time in a major naval engagement. The Arab fleet, which had been blockading the city for years, was annihilated. Sources describe dozens of ships burning simultaneously, the sea itself aflame, Arab sailors drowning or burning alive. The siege was broken. The Arab Caliphate's expansion into Europe was halted. Greek fire was used again in 717 during the Second Arab Siege of Constantinople. Once more, Byzantine fireships equipped with Greek fire scattered and destroyed the Arab fleet, preserving the city. Over the following centuries, Greek fire remained Byzantium's decisive naval weapon. It was deployed against the Rus Vikings in 941, when Prince Igor of Kiev attacked Constantinople with thousands of ships. The Byzantine navy, vastly outnumbered, used Greek fire to destroy the Rus fleet so completely that survivors fled in terror, spreading legends about Byzantine fire demons. In 1199, during the Fourth Crusade, Latin crusaders attacking Constantinople described with horror the Byzantine fireships armed with Greek fire. Though the Byzantines ultimately lost that battle due to political betrayal rather than military defeat, the terror of Greek fire impressed itself on the Crusaders' chronicles. But by the 13th century, references to Greek fire become sporadic. The secret was kept so closely that when the Byzantine Empire's political and military structures weakened, the knowledge began to fragment. By the time Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, the complete formula had been lost. Modern attempts to recreate Greek fire have produced many theories, but no definitive answer. We know from Byzantine sources that the formula included petroleum, naphtha, a naturally occurring form of crude oil, which was available in the Black Sea region and the Middle East. But naphtha alone does not explain Greek fire's properties. Naphtha burns, yes, but it can be extinguished by water and does not adhere to surfaces the way Greek fire did. Various additional ingredients have been proposed based on fragmentary historical references and modern chemical knowledge. Quicklime, calcium oxide, reacts violently with water, generating heat and potentially igniting flammable materials. This could explain why pouring water on Greek fire made it burn more intensely, but quicklime alone does not burn. Sulfur, mentioned in some Byzantine texts as an ingredient in incendiary weapons, burns with a characteristic choking smell, lowers the ignition temperature of other materials. But sulfur-based incendiaries were known throughout the ancient world and do not explain Greek fire's unique properties. Saltpeter, potassium nitrate, an oxidizer that could make flames burn more intensely and resist water. But saltpeter was rare in the Byzantine Empire and may not have been available in quantities needed for military use. Resin or pitch, natural adhesives that would make the mixture stick to ships and bodies. Pine resin and tar were widely used in ancient incendiaries. But again, this does not fully explain why Greek fire was uniquely devastating. Phosphorus. Some historians have speculated that Byzantine chemists discovered white phosphorus, which ignites spontaneously in air and burns with extreme heat. But there is no evidence that phosphorus was known in the ancient world, and the production process is complex. Modern experimental archaeologists have created various incendiary mixtures using combinations of these ingredients. Some burn on water, some resist water-based extinguishing, some adhere to surfaces, but none replicate all of Greek fire's documented properties simultaneously. The closest modern equivalent is napalm, a mixture of petroleum and thickening agents that sticks to surfaces and burns with intense heat. But napalm can be extinguished by water if enough water is applied, and it was invented in the 20th century using industrial chemistry. Greek fire was created in the 7th century, and it could not be extinguished by water at all. The Byzantine emperors understood that Greek fire's value lay not just in its effectiveness, but in its secrecy. The formula was classified as a state secret of the highest order. According to the 10th century Byzantine emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus, in his manual De Administrando Imperio, on the administration of the empire, Greek fire was one of 3 secrets that must never be revealed to foreigners under any circumstances. The other 2 were the Byzantine crown jewels and imperial ceremonial protocols. Constantine VII wrote that revealing the secret of Greek fire was a sin against God and would bring divine curse upon the emperor who disclosed it. The formula was transmitted orally within the imperial family and to a select group of military engineers called the fire masters, pyrovoliste. These specialists oversaw the manufacture and deployment of Greek fire, but apparently did not know the complete formula themselves, only their specific portions of the production process. Manufacturing was centralized in imperial arsenals under heavy guard. The ingredients were acquired separately through different supply chains to prevent any single merchant or official from knowing the complete list. The mixing was done in secret facilities. This compartmentalization protected the secret but also made it fragile. If a single link in the chain of knowledge was broken, if one emperor failed to pass the complete formula to his successor, if one firemaster died before training a replacement, the secret could be lost. And ultimately, it was. By the 13th century, the Byzantine Empire was in terminal decline. Constant warfare, internal political strife, and the disastrous Fourth Crusade, where Latin Christians sacked Constantinople in 1204, had weakened the state. The last documented use of Greek fire was in 1204, during that same Fourth Crusade, when the Byzantines used fireships against Venetian and Crusader vessels. After that, references disappear. When the Ottoman Turks finally conquered Constantinople in 1453, they captured all remaining Byzantine military equipment, arsenals, and records. Sultan Mehmed II employed Byzantine engineers and studied Byzantine military technology extensively. But Greek fire was not among the captured technologies. The Ottomans gained access to bronze tube weapons similar to those used to project Greek fire, but the incendiary mixture itself was gone. If any written records existed, they were destroyed in the fall of the city, or they were so cryptic and incomplete that they could not be understood without the oral transmission that had been lost. The secret died with the empire. Today, modern militaries possess incendiary weapons far more powerful than Greek fire. Napalm, white phosphorus, thermite, advanced chemical compounds that burn at thousands of degrees, destroy bunkers, and clear forests. But we still do not know how 7th century Byzantine chemists created a liquid incendiary that burned on water, resisted extinguishing, adhered to targets, and could be stored safely until needed. We have descriptions from dozens of primary sources, Byzantine and enemy accounts, describing its use in detail. We know it existed. We know it was decisive in multiple major battles across 7 centuries. We know the Byzantines guarded its secrets so carefully that only a handful of people ever knew the complete formula. And we know that when those people died without passing on the knowledge, a technology that had shaped Mediterranean naval warfare for over 600 years vanished completely. Modern chemistry can explain how various ancient technologies worked. We can recreate Roman concrete. We understand Greek fire weapons from other cultures, Chinese fire lances, Arab fire pots. We can analyze residues and reverse engineer ancient metallurgy. But Greek fire left no residue to analyze, no complete chemical treatise, no captured samples, only descriptions of effects and the knowledge that a small group of Byzantine specialists possessed a formula that modern science, with all its analytical tools, has not yet definitively reconstructed. It is a reminder that knowledge is fragile, that technological sophistication does not guarantee preservation, that entire bodies of practical expertise, formulas, techniques, processes that took generations to develop and refine, can vanish within a single generation if not documented, if not taught, if not preserved. Greek fire existed. Its effects are thoroughly documented. The historical evidence is overwhelming. But the secret of how to make it died 700 years ago, and it remains lost. We have examined 5 mysteries that modern science cannot fully explain. An ancient Greek astronomical computer containing gear technology that would not be reinvented for over 1,000 years. A medieval manuscript written in a language or cipher that no human or computer can read despite a century of attempts. A mass psychogenic event where hundreds of people danced themselves to death for reasons that no medical theory adequately explains. A temple complex built 11,000 years ago by hunter-gatherers who, according to our models of civilization, should not have possessed the organization or motivation to construct such a thing. And a military incendiary weapon so effective and so secret that when the civilization that created it fell, the formula was lost completely. These are not legends. These are not ancient astronaut fantasies or conspiracy theories. These are documented, physical, real phenomena studied by credentialed scholars using rigorous methods. Peer-reviewed papers discuss them. Major museums display them. Universities devote research programs to them. And after decades or centuries of analysis, the fundamental questions remain unanswered. The ancient mysteries that modern science still cannot explain are not failures of the scientific method. They are reminders of its limits. They teach us humility. They show us that human history is stranger and more complex than our models suggest. They demonstrate that knowledge is fragile, that entire bodies of understanding can vanish within a generation, and that previous civilizations achieved things we still struggle to comprehend. And they leave us with questions that may endure as long as the artifacts themselves. The gears still turn in the Antikythera mechanism, calculating eclipses for astronomers who have been dust for 2,000 years. The Voynich manuscript still sits in its library, pages filled with text no living person can read. The stones of Göbekli Tepe still stand in their circles, facing directions that may encode astronomical knowledge we have not yet deciphered. Greek fire still burns in historical accounts, terrifying and unstoppable, its formula lost, but its legacy enduring. And somewhere, in the collective memory of human civilization, the dancers still dance, unable to stop, unable to explain why. The mysteries remain, the questions endure, and modern science, for all its power, still cannot provide the answers.